Hello and welcome to Ag Attack here on KDNE 91.9 with Jordan Atwater and Cassandra Kennedy. We are here to talk about politics and agriculture and all the messy stuff in between.
Yeah.
So today's topic is the pain and the struggle of being a first-time farmer.
Yes, most definitely. So the reason why we're talking about this today is I actually kind of got into a little bit of a debate with someone about last week just how I thought that it would be beneficial to have more ag programs in some of our other schools. I mean, we do have a wonderful ag state, so, I would think it would be beneficial to put more ag classes or ag programs in the different secondary education that we have. And they said, though, they're like, well, why do we need that? It's so hard to become a farmer. And I was like, well, I agree with that. Totally get that point of view. My dad was a first-generation farmer. He moved from California, although he had family and farming relations back here in Nebraska. He was a first-generation farmer, and so I kind of was sitting back and I was like, yeah, is that the reason why individuals are so kind of apprehensive to getting into the farming industry or pursuing different degrees in agriculture?
Okay.
So I talked to my brother, who is going to be a second-generation farmer, but he is kind of in this age group that is kind of our age group right now that would be pursuing agriculture and pursuing being a farmer. And so he told me to go look on the web and see what other people are saying and stuff. So I did, and I found this great article on agriculture.com. And they were talking about how some of our biggest problems that are facing our young farmers, our first-generation farmers right now, is that capital, for one thing. It's really expensive to get into the farming industry right now. A lot of that is because capital for land, equipment, and seeds or supplies, chemicals, whatever you'd be using on your farm, or it's really hard to get a hold of that capital sometimes. And like right now for Nebraska, it's like over $3,000 per acre to buy land. So if you're looking at buying a large farm or like just a substantial plot of land, you're looking at $300,000 to close to $1 million. I mean, I've heard of land grant sales that have gone all the way up to $3 million.
Wow.
And so
how many acres would that be?
So let's see. Well, if you do the math, so if it's $3,000 per acre and you buy 100 acres, if you're going to be, an average size, you're looking right there. So multiplied by 100, you're already at 3,000.
So an average farm is 100 acres?
It can go anywhere. It can range, you can have larger farms that, get up towards, 600 acres. It depends on what size you can manage. A lot of people are going to start off small, though, because they can't afford to buy a ton of land.
Yeah.
And they can't afford to have the equipment, obviously, to farm that land as well. Because, if you have a lot of land, but you have a really small planter, you're going to be spending a lot of time during planting season out in the fields, because if you have a 6-row planter instead of, a 12-row, it's going to take you that much more time to be going through the field. So it's a lot of this stuff is going to come down to money and numbers. And so that's where, if I sat and thought about myself sitting in a chair and being like, okay, if I wanted to become a farmer, I right now would by no means have the funding to start this. So a lot of the farmers that are our age right now are going into farming have those connections, like their family is already a farmer. So like for my brother, my dad already has an established farm. Okay. So it's a little bit easier. It's not super easy for him, but it's a little bit easier just because he has those connections that way. But if you're someone that has no connections to the industry, if you live in an urban area, don't know anything about farming, but you just really want to farm, it's going to be a little bit difficult because you don't really have the knowledge, the background, and things like that, or the capital to do those things.
So why is farming so expensive?
So, land is basically the number one thing. So land is super expensive, but it's also just the fact, like right now, corn prices are not that high. So even though you have expensive land, you're putting a lot of money and effort into your crops, you're not really selling them for that large of a profit. Okay. So a lot of that, you maybe are able to stay in the black or break even, but a lot of people, and then it also comes down to you could do all the things right, and you could be washed out by 3 days of heavy rain, and then you lose all of that seed money that you just put into that crop. So it's kind of a gambling game a little bit to a point, what you're doing with your money in this industry. So it's just expensive because you have to first off. I mean, you're doing well water. Equipment breaks down a lot. It's the nature of the beast. So you're having to pay for equipment repairs. You have to pay for updates on equipment. I mean, we're moving into a technology kind of savvy industry now. I mean, everyone's wanting GPS on combines and tractors and stuff. I mean, if you think of where we came from with a horse and a plow to where we are now, it's just steadily getting more and more expensive as we're increasing the technology, the genetics for seeds. All these things are adding up. So it's just getting more and more expensive because you have to keep up with the name of the game. It's a competitive field. I mean, you want to be creating the best product. To do that, sometimes you need the latest, greatest thing. Not saying that the old systems don't work, but if you're trying to keep up with the industry, that's where it gets so expensive, is because we are being very progressive in our industry.
Is there like a high saturation of farmers right now too? Is that maybe pushing it, or?
A lot of it, it's one of the stats that I found in this article is that only 7.8% of farmers are under 35 years old. So a lot of farmers right now, if you're looking at them, they're above 40 years old. And so they've been farming for a long time. And when they got into the industry, it was a little bit less expensive. It wasn't quite what it is today. That's going to be kind of a factor. So there's a lot of farmers, but we still have a need for farmers. It's not that we don't have a need. Some farmers could maybe expand their own business a little bit if they wanted to, but at the same time, you can only be in so many areas at once. So one farmer can't be farming over 1,000 acres by himself. Sometimes they're going to need hired help to do that. I mean, I even know in the summer times for our family farm, just irrigating it alone is almost a full day job on things. Like you go morning and night when you're irrigating. Well, if you have a lot of land, you may be doing that all day and you may not be able to keep up either. So then you're having to hire people in. So that's where we're going to talk about a little bit how some of these young farmers are breaking into the industry and getting experiences. They can come in as that hired help to help out on those farms. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's saturated right now with a lot of farmers. It's just more that right now land prices are so large that it's really it's a hard balance to make. So it's hard to bring new people in when you can't really afford to.
And okay, what about large corporation farmers? Because I know they get a lot of flack for it. And are they could that be a reason the family farm is being driven down?
A little bit, because if you think about it, if it's so expensive and you can't alone, your own family, finance that operation, or if you've already taxed out any loans or USDA grants or anything that you're using, people that can afford that, which are going to be your larger industries and your larger companies, are going to be able to come in and kind of swoop in and pick up those type of things. So that's where you do see that increase in your larger commercial farms instead of your mom and pop, local owned family farms. So although in my area, I'm very proud of my area just for where I come from because it's all family farmed. I mean, I don't know we don't have a large presence of, your large commercial industry.
So do you feel like as a family farmer, this is maybe a little off topic, but
no, it's okay.
Questions. As a family farmer, do you feel kind of aggravated or angry with corporate farms, or? So for me, I guess, and everything that I say, this is all my own opinion. This is not an expert's opinion in any way. I always want to say that because I'm not an expert on this issue. But for me, it's kind of that double-edged sword because those large companies are really good about giving back and giving funding to things too. They do that really well. Yeah, because, corporate social responsibility.
Exactly. Well, and there's different companies. I know Monsanto is a larger industry, but they give back to FFA. They really fund a lot of those programs, a lot of research, things like that. So I'm always grateful to them for that.
Yeah.
But then we also run into the things where patenting is becoming a larger thing in our agricultural industry, and that's causing a lot of issues to a point for organic farmers. I knew a story. One of my friends that I met when I was in high school, she actually grew up on an organic farm, and she was telling me that it's an extremely difficult kind of lifestyle almost for farming in a way, from what her stance was, because she was saying that for them, they have to be very conscious of everything that they're handling with the crops. Because, obviously, if anything, that chemicals or anything like that that touch the product, it's no longer organic anymore. So she was just saying, though, that they had a farm that was located right next to a larger commercial farm.
Okay.
The commercial farm had a patent on that seed. And so there's nothing that you can do to stop this. This is a funny part of the story. So it's cross-pollination.
Yeah.
So it was a cross-pollination of from that seed over into their crop, which was an organic seed crop. And they were going to be in a lawsuit with this commercial farm because it was stealing a patent that they didn't get permission to. And for me, I was like, I can't believe that. Like, that's crazy. Because how can you stop that? I mean, pollen is in the air everywhere. Like, you can't stop that. But it was a thing that her family was facing at the time. It was really fascinating to me because I never had heard that story. Because for me, didn't grow up on an organic farm.
Yeah.
I'm not really quite sure what the seed laws and what happens with patents and things like that.
That's still dumb. It's like pushing out the like local farm. Like,
exactly.
I mean, so this local farm's really gonna overtake you here with their like quarter of.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, and that's the thing. That was the issue. It was just kind of one of those things that you sit there and you sit back, and it's this industry and this company that they give back to a lot of things. So you've always had this perfect
have to
image.
Keep their ethical standards.
Exactly. And now that I know that, I kind of sit back and. It's like one of those things you always take it with a grain of salt. Like, they're doing a great job of giving back, and I would never want to discredit what they're doing in that sense. But then when you hear these stories about a lawsuit over cross-pollination because of
maybe the
just
fact
location.
That, like, the large corporations are a lot of the reasons that you guys get a bad name. Like, smaller farms, like PETA pulls out these, like, images, and it's like, well, the large corporations are doing that,
exactly.
Not small family farms who we should be supporting.
Exactly. And that's always going to be a problem because I can speak for, I guess, my family in a sense, and probably some of the areas around me that are small family farms. We really care about what we do.
Yeah.
We want to produce a good product. I mean, obviously, you want to make a profit. It is an industry. It is a job. It's a process. So, yes, but we do want to make the best quality product possible. Mm-hmm. So when you see these images, or even, like, for us as livestock producers, you see these images and you're like
animal cruelty.
What is this? Yeah, it's like, where is this coming from? And some of those images are so old. And I know we talked about that a few shows back, but all those things are just problems and stuff. And even those things can make individuals apprehensive at getting into the industry, just because there is a lot of backlash from your lobbying firms, and we have PETA and you have the non-GMO movement and things like that. And there's a lot of controversy out there. And some people don't understand this controversy, or some people will just ignore it and think that it's not a problem. But when you really look at the grand scheme of things, all of those things can add up in a way. And so back, I guess, to the commercial farming, I like them, but I take everything they say with a grain of salt, because I've seen kind of the backside of what can happen, and it's not pretty in my eyes. And so I don't know whatever ended up for that family and with that lawsuit, and I'm sure that something worked out in the end, but it was definitely one of those things. She even said, though, like, after that cross kind of pollination and like drifting of pesticides and things like that, which it's uncontrollable. It's not like that company meant to do that on purpose, but they couldn't use those crops for
can't
organic.
They like sue then and be like,
I have no idea. Well, and I asked her that, and she's like, I don't really know. We were both sitting there, we're like, well, we're not lawyers, so we have no idea.
See, even like law can be a part of agriculture.
Oh,
like,
yeah, for sure.
Talking about what we talked about last week, all of the facets you can get involved with agriculture.
Yes. Farming
law, I'm sure, is huge and underrepresented. So.
Well, and a lot of things, it's also then like you have when, it's so sad, but when a parent dies, and then it's that inheritance,
Yeah.
And if you're inheriting land, I mean, the price of the land, like, some individuals, if they don't have the capital at that point, then they can lose a family farm, or it's extremely difficult for them to keep things going. So, law is even a part of it, but it's the nature of the beast. It's the kind of the sad thing that we face every day. And it's not just farmers. There's other industries that have the same problems. I mean, we're just touching on agriculture right now, but that's how it's going to be. You're always going to have the larger corporations that have more power because they have more capital.
Yep.
And it all comes back down to the capital and what funding that you have for your occupation, which is, I did a lot more stats this week because I wanted to get a lot of stats going. But I found the USDA did a poll in September of 2015, and it was really interesting that I was able to pick up all of the costs for land in the United States. So that was really interesting. So Nebraska is actually in, we're called the Northern Plains Economic Region right now. So like I said, $3,050, so a little bit over $3,000 per acre for farm real estate value, which if you don't know what farm real estate value is, it's the value at which all land and buildings used for agriculture production, including dwellings, could be sold under current market conditions if allowed to remain on the market for a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
So that includes basically everything. That's your home, that's where you put your shed for farm equipment, grain bins, all that. That's all included in that. So we're at $3,000, a little over $3,000. And that's actually a little bit of a decrease. That's a 2.2% decrease from last year's. But then our pasture value in Nebraska is only $890. So, I mean, if you really wanted to invest in pasture land, if you're a livestock producer, maybe you could go that route too, which was it was a 3.3% decrease. But the problem is while we actually have some of the lower prices in land in Nebraska in comparison to some other states, but you can't really sell your crops for a larger profit because right now corn and soybean prices are kind of a little bit on the decline from the past 5 years. I mean, back in 2012, we had great kind of corn prices and stuff, and then it steadily declined just a little bit. So yeah, I find it really interesting. So capital is a big thing because young farmers right now, they can't get into the industry just because they're being held back a little bit by their money that they can access. And then so a lot of these farmers, the way that they're going to be able to get that access to equipment and things like that is they're going to work with a farmer.
Okay. Yeah.
So when my dad moved back to Nebraska, went to the university, got his degree, he worked as a hired hand. A lot of individuals will work as a hired hand if they just even to learn the business and to learn about skills and techniques, because there's a lot of information. You can go to a class and learn about it, but a lot of things are just the techniques that have been used.
Like any job,
Yeah, exactly. And so I know that a lot of, friends from back in my high school and, in the surrounding area, they are working as hired hands for farmers, and they've grown up on their family farms working for their parents and stuff. So they're gaining that access. So then maybe when they can finally purchase or even rent land, they can finally kind of get into those areas and have access to equipment, maybe have a rental agreement with a farmer or work out some agreement with an equipment producer. But that's one of the issues then. And so sometimes even they have to work 2 jobs. So they're not just a farmer, which is already a full-time job, but some of them will use their degree in some way. Maybe they'll be a teacher or something, or they'll do whatever odd and end job that they can do so they can just make some more capital so they can put that into their future farm. So that's always, I think, really interesting. And then there's all these things that, access to land is, besides just the cost, we talked about commercial landowners being able to kind of go in because they already have the capital, but you also have already well-established family farms that are able to go in and they have the capital to purchase more land, or they already have, rental agreements that they're going on 20 years now. So for a 20-year period, that individual young farmer may not be able to quite get into that area for that. And not saying that's a bad thing, but that's something that is kind of can hold up and be a roadblock for a young farmer. Okay. So those are kind of the main topics I was going to talk about today.
Okay.
Facing our young farmers in the industry. So,
sweet. Well, we'll talk more about those and how to kind of get in and be a young farmer nowadays when we come back from our break. You also can always tweet at us at KDNE or at Jordan Atwater, capital JORDYN, capital ATWATER.
Yes.
Or you can tweet at me, Cass Cassnsass, CASSNSASS.
Yes.
So, all the tweets. We highly encourage conversation, as this is part of Joy in the Conversation with Doane Senior Media, a project we're putting on to make students in the community more aware about politics. And as we've come to know, agriculture has a lot to do with politics in this country.
Most definitely.
So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Hey, Ag Attack is back with Jordan Atwater and
Hey guys.
on KDNE. Today we're talking about being a new farmer and how you can, a young farmer, and how you can work towards getting into the industry, what's holding them back. If you ever want to join the conversation, please always tweet at KDNE or at one of us. Take it away, Jordan.
Yeah, so basically we kind of just covered a little bit earlier what the issues we're facing, and that was capital. Obviously, everything in our economy, regardless if you're a farmer or not, comes down to money on the grind. So one of the things, though, we're going to talk about now is what resources are available to young farmers, or and it doesn't have to be young farmers. I know we're saying young farmers, but anyone just wanting to get started in the industry. And so when I first was researching this topic, one of the things that first popped up was Delaware. So Delaware actually hosted a convention to discuss issues facing agriculture. So when I think of farming, I kind of think more of like the breadbasket area. But so Delaware had an interesting perspective on it, which I really, really enjoyed. But the nice thing is they had a really wide range of attendees and kind of their keynote speakers for the event. So they had their Secretary of Agriculture, they had a natural resource manager, and then they had a variety of farmers. So they had historical farmers that use the older techniques of farming. So they're not using like the GPS, the technology, things like that. They had organic farmers, they had 5th generation farmers, and then they had kind of your second year farmers, the farmers that are just getting into the heart of things. And then they also took students that worked for Monsanto. Okay. And so they took students that are interning, and they took representatives from the larger companies. So they had this huge coalition of basically everyone in the industry, which I would love to just see them all interact, because all of these individuals are for a common purpose, but they also have very different views of that purpose. Sure. So I would have loved to just be like a fly on the wall to see like if there was any like questions or tension. But so they discussed topics, everything from organic versus chemicals, which that would be fascinating to listen to. But they also talked about young farmers' access and feeding a growing world. So eventually, like our stat said, with only 7%, a little over 7% of individuals being farmers are under 35, we're going to hit an age where the farmers that we have right now are going to retire, and they're going to get outside of the industry. So who's going to take up all that slack, and are they going to be able to get in there? Yeah. Are they going to be able to, first off, flourish in the industry? We don't want them to falter at all, because we do have an ever-growing need to feed the world.
Oh, for sure.
So that was one of the topics that they talked about. And so they really drew attention to one of the programs that they do to help their young farmers, and the Department of Agriculture in Delaware. They call it Program for Young Farmers. Not necessarily the most original name, but it's very, very clear. So they do a lot of loans, and they really like to get help their individuals get started. So kind of this loan that they have, so their Preservation Foundation, what they do is you have to fill out an application for it, and you can get a loan to up to $500,000. So a lot of individuals will be able to get 150 acres, maybe up to 400 if they really want to. So that's quite a bit. Yeah. So for your first farm, you're doing pretty well. So they also then gave the stats. So the very first year that they had it, they said they gave the stats of how many acres were purchased, and then the young farmer loan that they got. So a lot of these people, so the first year they had over 10 applicants for the program. They gave out loans over $2.5 million worth, and there was 854 acres bought that year for farming. So I found that really interesting. But most of the farmers that were using it, and I would be really curious to see what they were using it for, the lowest one was 27 acres. So some people just wanted to buy 27 acres, so they only got a loan for about $150,000. And then some people went hard for it, and they got 152 acres with their loan. Wow. So it was really interesting. So they got close to their $500 max.
And
so
these are all young people?
These are all young farmers. So on their application, they do ask for an age or kind of where you're at in your process. So this is more for your first generation farmers, or the farmers that are just getting into the industry, starting their own farm. So they're not necessarily a generational family farm where it can be passed down. So they have a lot of kind of criteria, like you have to be 18 years old and no older than the age of 40. So they have a cap on that, which it fits in with our 35-year-old gap. I mean, we want young farmers to be getting into the industry. So obviously we're going to try to target a younger crowd. But you must not have a net worth of more than $300,000. So you're not applicable for the loan if you have more than $300,000 of net worth. So found that really interesting. And, of course, the farmland had to be purchased in state, so you can't go out of the state, obviously. And it has to contain at least 15 tillable acres. So it's very interesting. They have, like, a lot. There's at least 10 kind of eligibility criteria. And so a lot of it then gets more into, like, your pre-existing loans that you have, things like that, like how much are you withdrawing.
Do they have to owe anything back to the program afterwards?
So they do have to like pay back steadily, but I believe it's a pretty reasonable kind of what you're paying, and like the interest is really low, so you're not
that's nice.
you're not having this really difficult process where you're
Yeah.
going to be in debt for a long time. So yeah, it says they schedule settlements on approved loans simultaneously with the purchase. So you'll work out a system with them. So I found it really interesting that Delaware did that. And so I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, Delaware. And so then I was like, okay, what's Nebraska doing?
Yeah,
Obviously we live in Nebraska.
What's Delaware got?
Yeah, you
what's
know.
their farming?
Yeah, so I found it really interesting. I came back and looked at Nebraska, and Nebraska actually has quite a few financing programs that you can go through. So you can use the USDA Farm Services Agency, Farm Credit Services of America, the Nebraska Investment of Finance Authority, Nebraska Department of Agriculture, and the Nebraska Department of Revenue. So not only do they give us financing programs, but they also offer, they kind of on this website, they talk about where you can get more education then for agriculture. So then not only are you making an investment into the physical aspects of the farm, but you're also then you can, invest in your mental aspects of like kind of how the industry runs, what you need to be doing, correct procedures and that. So
you don't just like crash. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's not like anyone can just come around and be like, oh, I'm
I
gonna,
want a farm.
I want
like
a
me
farm.
tomorrow, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, so I then looked up at the USDA FSA, which is the Farm Service Agency, and their farm loan programs. And so for the maximum loan amount, you can get $300,000. So that's a direct operating loans, which is targeted for beginning farmers. And then you're going to like this, Cassandra, minority and women farmers.
Oh, that's
We haven't even
interesting.
hit the topic
Yeah,
of women
what?
farmers.
I didn't even think of that.
Yes, I know. Everyone, well, I mean, when you think of farmers, you usually think of males.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. But it's interesting. It's just, we do have a very small amount of women that get into the industry. I know when you think of farmers, usually women are more, I hate to say it, but in the realm of like farmer's wife. Like not saying that they do any less work than their husbands.
Yeah.
I mean, the women are just involved, just as invested. But you don't see a lot of first generation or first beginning farmers that are strictly women.
Yeah, I would not think of that.
No, so I mean, when we're talking about young farmers, we're not just talking about males, but we're talking about minority groups and we're talking about women. So
That's awesome.
it's really cool that they really expanded these loans to also target women and minorities as well. So I mean, again, that touches a little bit into politics. How much are we offering for funding and exemptions of things for those minority groups and for women? Because I think they said that was like less than 2%. Nationwide are like beginning women farmers.
If you find a first generation woman farmer, bring her on this show. We are going to talk.
Yeah, so, and it also, some of the stats are, we talked a little bit about education. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes education can be a little expensive, and the time that you're getting that education can take away from your farm. Mm-hmm. So they were talking about in 1964 when, farming became farming, not really, but when it became the industry where it was very much this, you could trade and you could do all these things and stuff. 4% of farmers had a college degree. 2011, 25% had a 4-year college degree, and then that's compared with 28% of non-farmers with a 4-year college degree. So a lot of farmers are going for a college degree. So now we're getting up to about 53%. So we're getting a lot of farmers that are going and getting some type of degree, whether it be a 2-year associate degree or going all the way for a 4 years bachelor's degree.
And your brother has a degree.
He has a degree. He has a degree in ag economics. Okay. So he went for 4 years to the U. My dad got a college degree. A lot of farmers in my area have gone and gotten some type of technical degree or their bachelor's degree, which is fantastic. I mean, I'm all about educating and education and pursuing that. But there's a lot of problems now. A lot of individuals, not only, we talked about capital, but there's a lot of those farmers are finding it hard to pay off student loans too. So that's where we come into the education side of things. Not only is it expensive to get into the physical aspects of farming, but it's also difficult to get the education too because, and we know college
loans on loans. Let me buy land on a loan. Let me pay my college loan.
I was just going to say, I mean, we know as college students, like, education is not cheap in our country. And so not only do they have just kind of those barriers of the like really expensive land, having access to equipment, having access to land in general, they're having to pay a lot for their education to even know how to do things. Yeah. And so we want them to have those things, but it's nice. So Nebraska offers loans and grants and things like that where it can be applied to both your education and both for a land grant as well.
And agriculture scholarships.
Exactly.
Okay.
I knew in my area when I was applying for a lot of scholarships for college, a lot of them were targeted at young farmers or individuals that were going for some type of agricultural degree, which I thought was fascinating. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot for a biochemistry major like myself, but there was a lot of scholarships available for individuals that would be going to the university for, an ag degree or community college for a technical degree. So there was a lot of access to those things, which is really good.
Something that they did in Europe when I was studying abroad and I found out about was like programs in their country that they were kind of diminishing, that they were starting to need a push for younger people, specifically teaching or nursing, I guess was one of them.
Yeah.
What they did is they had this like 10-year plan where if you worked in your field for 10 years and like you paid your loans regularly, your student loans, and you worked in your field at that 10-year mark, your student loans would be waived.
Really?
You would stop having to pay on them.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that's
really
an
cool.
Interesting social approach.
Yeah. No, we don't have that here.
Yeah, we don't have that here.
We don't have it here.
That might be something that like future politicians could bring up for education.
Exactly.
Like I know right now we're looking at a lot of like free education, but there might be other ways. Instead of just giving it for free or just talking about that, we have other solutions that are out there that other countries are trying. I was going to say,
something that's a little more manageable, probably,
like,
that's not...
That way the school's still making money, but, you're also...
You're not making it detrimental for them to go to college and putting them into debt. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
And it gives you more motivation to actually do something with the degree and contribute to society.
Well, exactly.
So.
And, I mean, for farmers getting degrees, a lot of, ag economics, you're using things that are in a business setting. You have to know about trading. You have to know the economics of the industry. That's only going to help you further your job and also make your business really successful. And you can go back and you can help educate your local area.
Yeah,
as well.
and it's all about society. You're contributing to your society. You're literally making food. But but you're also, you're making an income for yourself, therefore you're spending that income elsewhere.
Exactly.
And that income is going into your community, so your community can then spend it using something else. And so it's like a train of reasons why to do something like that.
Exactly. So. Well, on the topic of politics, something that I wanted to bring up, and I'm interested to hear your side of this, Cassandra. So back when, in 2013, there was a bill in Nebraska that was about taxes, and we all know... Taxes.
A rough spot.
It's a rough spot in society today. Okay. But this was a bill that was presented for tax reform. So basically what this tax was going to do was it was going to decrease the income tax.
Okay.
But to do that, obviously there has to be a trade-off. We can't just be like, let's reduce income tax, without having a trade-off somewhere else.
Yes.
So they wanted to take away some tax exemptions that were already in place for the state of Nebraska, and that would include manufacturing machinery and equipment, agricultural machinery and equipment, industrial machinery and equipment, ingredient or component parts, insulin. So now we're going into more medical field, hospital equipment, fuel used in irrigation, farming, manufacturing, or by hospitals, and equipment built in state or sold outside Nebraska. So for farmers, there is tax exemption on different items that you would be using for farming, your equipment, obviously like fuel for irrigation and for your farming industry in general. And so this bill was going to eliminate that.
Okay.
Altogether.
Oh, like completely eliminate that.
Yeah, so these were going to be cut. So now we're not having these tax exemptions.
Okay.
And luckily this bill was not passed. There was no action taken on this bill, but it was kind of scary when you thought about it, because it's like, okay, the income tax.
Oh, yeah.
And they were saying that it would be more stable for our industry and for Nebraska is if we cut the exemptions and we would have to pay more taxes on just that list I read, and we would decrease the income tax. That's what I thought. So, but what's interesting is if you look at this list, it's targeting two industries, our medical industry and our farming industry. And we come from the state of Nebraska, which is propped up a little bit on agriculture.
Yeah.
I feel like we could maybe all agree to say.
Sure.
So it was really interesting that they wanted to target these things. And so the reason why I bring this up is I actually took a politics class
Okay.
during the summer between my summer and junior year. And this bill was brought up. So it was after, I mean, obviously it was a year after and the bill had been declined, but we were talking about how specific laws can target individual groups. So in income tax, everyone has an income tax. Farmers have an income tax. We all have an income tax.
Yeah.
So I brought it up and was like, well, this was a bill that was proposed that was targeting farmers. And I had an individual that got very upset that they're like, well, farmers make so much money and they can just go buy new combines for whatever they want. And I'm like, okay, realistically, that's not really how things work. I mean, although they're getting tax exemptions, you have to think about how much is land costing. Like, you can go buy a car and you're going to have a tax on that car, but you're not having to pay, $3,000 to keep it up. Like, you don't have to pay you don't have a specific price for the land. You have land housing and stuff like that, but it's not as expensive as what you're going to be purchasing for farmland. So it's just one of those things that's just kind of like, okay, where you drive your car then, you don't own, but like, so they can't get a tax exemption on like over $100,000 piece of equipment. Like, okay, that doesn't really make sense to me. And then I said, well, you're targeting one group, whereas the other one is a tax for everyone. Farmers are still included in that tax, but this one is like directly targeting.
Yeah, it's like it's helping some of the people, but it's not really helping half of the population.
Yeah, so I've just found like I started to think about that, and when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I was like, what if that bill had been passed?
Interesting.
Young farmers would definitely, first generation farmers, any type of individual trying to get into the industry, that would change the face of how we are, like how you're purchasing equipment, how you're farming, like the quality of your farm equipment. I mean, just you can keep any type of equipment in the best shape possible. You can take great care of it, but there's always a depreciation on it. So you're losing value. Yeah. And it's going to get to the point where it's going to go out of style, not style, but it's going to become to the point where it can't be usable anymore. There's breakdowns, things that happen. What happens at that point for that farmer? Because it's going to be a little hard to purchase all this equipment and all this stuff if you don't have those tax exemptions. Yeah. So I was really interested to hear your perspective on that, just being, because if you I wouldn't mind the, income tax being decreased. Like if I was a non-farmer, I'd be like, yeah, all for that. But this individual didn't have any ties to farming, so it was really interesting.
Well, you're asking the wrong person, first of all, because, like, I'm a liberal socialist, so I believe in taxes, basically. That's literally, like, if you think of a stereotype, that's what you think of. But, I mean, I do, like, I probably would have just looked at it like, oh, it's an income tax decrease. Yeah. Where is that being cut? Because for me, if you can't say no more taxes without, in my opinion, that's what caused our recession and caused our entire issues during the Bush presidency. But that's a whole other topic. But Bush, he promised no more taxes, and he was adamant and followed through on it, and he didn't cut anywhere else. He cut taxes and then bumped up military spending, and we didn't have that money to spend. And so it's like you always have to cut somewhere if you're going to cut income taxes. So it's really not helping the general populace. And so for me, it's like what helps society the most. And I don't see how decreasing an income tax to basically bump up a tax on farmers is really going to help the society as a whole, because farmers, like, they are a huge part of our economic system. Yeah. And if you hurt them, you're still hurting us. And so so we work as a whole for society. We're not, that's how I perceive my work. Yeah. And so I perceive that what I'm doing is to help my world in the future. And to do that, I have to help the whole, not just the individual. And so, like, I don't believe in cutting an income tax, especially for that. Like, my mom's a teacher. Yeah. Like, in Colorado right now, there's a huge attack on education. And so a lot of people are like, oh, teachers, they get the summers off, they get nights off, their life can't be that hard. Like, why do we give them so much breaks? And, like, why do we give education so much tax breaks? And it's like, I mean, we're educating here.
Exactly.
It's not just they get the nights off. Like, do you know what they're doing during their summer? It's like,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get your perspective on it. So I wouldn't be
I was just,
against it.
I was really curious because, like, this individual, I can see where they're coming from because in their life, they're not affected at all.
Yeah, I can play devil's advocate if you want.
I mean, if you want to, yeah.
Like, I mean, I've been to your farm, and I look around and I'm like, dang, this is, like, some nice stuff.
I know. Well, and that's how this individual was thinking. They're like, well, I see farmers, like, rolling around in brand new equipment and stuff like that. And I was like, well, you do realize that most of your capital, like, most farmers, their net worth is tied up.
Like, that's
in
what
their
they
farm.
buy. Yeah, like,
that's what they have
instead
to
of
buy.
buying a new car, they're buying this.
Exactly. Like, if you think about it, everything that we're buying is not necessarily, like, for hugely personal use. It's for a business. So if you owned a business, your car is not necessarily, like, the immediate purpose for that business. Now, for the farming industry, yes, we're buying combines and tractors and things, but we're not using that for, like, personal use. It's not like I'm going to drive to school in a tractor and be like, wow, look at me, I'm rolling up in my John Deere right now.
Okay, devil's advocate here, though.
Okay.
I do remember one time we drove by your farm and we filled up your gas tank with your family gas.
Oh, yeah, that does, yeah. So, but that is, we purchased that ourselves, so that does not come with that tax exemption.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that is, like, different. Like, when you talk about fuel for the industry, that's, like, diesel and stuff like that, like, I don't have access to that. Like, the other stuff is, like, like a family gas tank, and that's where you purchase oil and stuff.
So, again, back to devil's advocate. You chose this life.
Oh, true.
Like,
yeah,
why should I have to pay for the life that you chose?
So, I guess my thing is what I would rebuttal and say with that. Okay, so, fine, you don't have to pay for what we chose. I'm going to jack up the prices on all my products that I'm giving to you. So, now you're going to have to pay more for all of your products that you're buying from the store. So really, that income tax that you had checked down, let's balance it out a little bit. Because, you know, that's what's going to happen with you. Like, any industry that you have, like, if someone bumps up the prices on something for you, you're going to have to, you know, expect more money in return. So, but at the same time, farmers can't really do that. Like, they can't just walk into a place with their corn and be like, I expect this much money. Like, we do have, like, we have to go by what our stock market. Yeah, so it's like, well, it doesn't, we don't get our prices set by, ours is all by stocks and trading, but it comes back and it's like, okay, that's fine, but you do realize that you're not going to have as many farmers. There's going to be a huge increase in demand. Corn prices are going to skyrocket, and then all your stuff that you're buying, and if you have anything that has ethanol in it, if you drive anything that, you know, unleaded vehicles, anything like that, everything is going to increase.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, is it really that beneficial for you to have just you as and it's like, also, I still have an income tax as well. It's not like I'm getting any breaks, and it's like, if you want to, go buy a tractor with a tax exemption, like, go do it. Like, if you really want to, that's totally okay. Yeah. So that's how I would rebuttal that with the individual, which is what one of the things I did say to the individual in my politics class. So he was very frustrated, but I also came back with a point too. It's like, we're also in an industry that's unpredictable. We are affected by, it's not like just my area is affected by my area. Yeah. So corn prices for the entire nation is what's going to affect my family industry. But we can talk about that a little bit more after our break.
Yeah, we can. Because I don't have anything to rebuttal anymore, to be honest.
Okay.
I agree. Like, that, it goes back to what I was saying. Like, you have to think of the whole. Like, I mean, by me decreasing something that I think is going to be beneficial for me, it's obviously not, because then the whole is going to go up.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's that mindset again. But we will keep talking about how trying to be a startup farmer is difficult and politics around startup farming.
Yes.
When we return from this quick break, again, you can always tweet at KDNE or tweet at Jordan Atwater, Jordan with a Y. We are Ag Attack here on 91.9. All right, we're back with Ag Attack. Jordan Atwater, Cassandra Kennedy coming at you live.
Hey guys.
91.9. We're kind of talking about a wide variety of things this show, but it was more geared towards how being a farmer isn't this like glamorous or easy life, especially if you're a young farmer trying to get into the job. Yeah,
and so what we were just talking about was one of the bills that almost got passed, and it was a little scary because it was targeting farmers. And so to talk a little bit, to touch on politics, I think in our industry today, we need to do and offer more things to young farmers, and we need to have those tax breaks, and we need to have, better loans and having, low interest loans, things like that for our young farmers that are coming into the industry, because it's extremely expensive to get into it. I mean, and it's something that's necessary. I'm not saying that it's, make it free for all people to like become a farmer, but I think we have to have those things in place. And so that's why I always appreciate, for me personally, politicians that touch on the subject of agriculture and recognize, right now corn prices aren't the greatest. Land prices are super high. Where is this divide coming from? Like, how can we manage this in a better way that's efficient? And, so that's why I get excited when I see these USDA articles that are talking about we're having decreases by a percentage in land prices, even though it's only 2.2%, still a decrease.
Yeah.
And I get excited about those things. We're even seeing like the FSA is providing $300,000 loans to individuals that do have low interest rates and that have, those kind of planned out processes where it's an easier payback method than what a traditional loan may be. And so I think we need more of that. And I would agree that can go across the board, for education. We talked about a little bit about education being so expensive and individuals that go into the farming industry wanting to get an education to fall back on. I mean, if you think about it, it is a risk. You're putting your money fully into this industry. It's a risk that you may lose out and you need a fallback job.
But like also if you put education into something, you're hoping to get it better. And so we're constantly in a state of trying to better ourselves and better our farming techniques.
Yeah.
And that's why you want your farmers to go to school.
Exactly.
You want them to like learn. And that's not to discredit those who don't, because obviously what we're doing is working, in my opinion.
Yes.
But there's always room for improvement. And
exactly.
So education is never a bad thing. It's not necessarily a fallback on. It's even just a better thing.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. It's just kind of, we have to find this divide where it's not so expensive to be able to get to the jobs that we want.
Yeah.
And I mean, that goes for any of us, in our education field, like you said. And then with farming, it's all about money. Basically, the title of our show this week should be about money and capital, because that's really the biggest issue that's facing young farmers. I mean, there's other things that, access to education or working with an older farmer and a well-established family farmer, going against the larger industries, companies, your commercial farms, things like that. That is harder, and those are some risks. But it all comes down to, like, you need the money to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I find really interesting, that we don't necessarily have those tools and it's not a huge priority. And I get that. I get why that's a problem. Like, it would solve a little bit of the issue is if we could reduce the cost of education. But, I mean, land prices being at what they are is kind of like...
Yeah. What about going back to those corporations?
Oh, yeah.
Those corporations are going to sue every little farmer that's trying to start up. Like,
I know.
Back too. So maybe... That's another area that politicians can look at is how to keep these corporations from really staunching the small farmers. Like maybe having a certain percentage of the state has to be a small farm. I think that might be an interesting thing to look at. But
and that's just like a lot of there's in this article that kind of based my topic for tonight a little bit is they were talking about how we can seed the future crop and how like our future crop of farmers in this industry. But it's a touchy subject. But yeah, a lot of that is you have the larger corporations that that can come in and just swoop up, and they have the money. They have the power and the money and the influence, and they have power to lobby for the bills and for politicians to support their causes. And sometimes those line up with small family farms. I'm not going to say like some of the bills that they lobby for don't, because obviously this bill for Nebraska, they would have been totally opposed to that, because I mean, they would have lost their profit too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do sometimes have we have the same goal, but there's also offshoots of where they have more power and more capital, and they overshadow small family farms. Because for me, if I wanted to go into farming right now, I'm not going to have the power to go up to your larger companies and be like, I want to be an organic farmer, but you can't sue me if you like cross-pollinate or like, you know, I'm already spending a lot of money and like making sure that everything's organic and I don't have any type of pesticides, herbicides, anything that's getting into the crops. And you just like sprayed it and
I don't have any like legal grounds to
sue you. Exactly. Well, it's crazy. And it's like, and then we get back into patent laws and we're like, how come it's easier for you to make a patent? I have to buy my seed from a company. Like, I can't just make my own seed because it's probably a patent from one of yours. Like, you have, like, 17 patents on seed. Like, is that even okay to, like, let a company have a patent on a seed? Like, there was one.
Yeah, that's
well, one of my research projects that I had here at Doane is they, a seed company was doing a dicamba resistant seed, and dicamba is an herbicide.
Okay.
And so having a dicamba resistant seed crop so a lot of farmers would be like all for that, because then they could use dicamba and they could, you know, kill a lot of the hard to kill plants that we have that plague our field crops and stuff. But if they patent that, well, so they have ownership over that crop, and if there's any type of cross pollination, anything like that, so then it's like you're getting into like not even organic farming. You can get into like
where do you stop? Like, where is it no longer an original plant? Like,
that's where we get into like patent laws. Like, how can you like? It's not your fault. It's not like you necessarily stole the genetics that are patented, but they happened all the same. It's natural. It's like stopping the rain from falling. Like, can't really do it. It's a little hard.
Interesting. Well, that might be a whole other topic for next week.
Yeah, no, that's something that we can definitely get into. And if you guys have any ideas or topics that you would like to discuss, you can always tweet at me at Jordan with a Y. A lot of people don't know it's with a Y. Atwater, or at Cassandra, who's Cass and Sass, or at KDNE here at the Edge of Indy. And so we will be monitoring that to see what kind of topics you guys want to talk about.
And you can also always email Doane Student Media with ideas, or if you'd ever like to be featured on the show, if you have some strong opinions that go against Jordan, we would love to hear from you. So please contact us. So again, this is all about joining the conversation. We want to start a conversation about politics, not shove our opinions down your throat, but we want to hear from everybody, because we are in a marketplace of ideas.
Most definitely.
And we want to learn from each other.
I would love to talk to like PETA. Like, if I can, guys, I'm gonna try to get a PETA representative or someone who's a big believer.
Start tweeting at PETA every time we have a show.
I would love to talk. I would love to just hear their stance, and we are here for open, respectful discussion and debate. And so, yeah, if you guys know anyone that if they listen to the show and they don't quite agree, I am not an expert on this, and I'm willing to have that discussion and be educated myself.
Community members or Doane members, all
Most
are
definitely.
welcome. All right, well, we're coming back to you on some music. We've got Hello by Adele. It looks like you guys caught the Grammys last night. Apparently, she had a stunning performance. So
she also had a mic breakdown. Did you hear about that? In the middle of her performance, her mic kind of flaked out on her. There was a lot of issues I heard with the Grammys performance and some technological difficulties. So
that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it will sound better than on our radio show.
Yeah.
But we also have Sam Smith with Play Me Down, and just a bunch of great music coming at you on the Edge of Indy, KDNE 91.9. It is 6 o'clock here, and that's our station ID if anybody cares.